He should have kept his mouth shut. Everyone in the mess hall knew it the second the private slammed his tray down and started mocking the quiet woman eating alone at the corner table. He thought she was just some civilian guest, maybe a base visitor, someone easy to bully in front of his friends. He didn't know she was an off-duty Marine officer who had seen more combat than he had seen sunrises. And when she finally stood up, the entire room felt the shift, the kind of silence that happens right before a storm hits. If you love stories about hidden strength, real discipline, and the moments that expose true character, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Endless Stories so you never miss another powerful tale. The mess hall at Camp Whitemore always felt louder on Fridays. Something about the end of the work week loosened the tension in everyone's shoulders, made conversations roll faster, made the metallic clatter of trays sound less like routine and more like release. It was barely noon, yet the place felt packed edge to edge, chairs scraping, boots stomping, forks tapping, someone laughing a little too loudly near the drink machine. It was controlled chaos, the familiar kind only a military base could produce. Captain Elena Brooke stepped inside just as a new wave of noise rose to meet her. She paused for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the inside light while her mind subconsciously mapped the room. Old habits were hard to kill, even on an off-duty day. She counted exits without thinking, noted uniforms, recognized ranks, and stored them in the back of her mind. It wasn't paranoia, it was reflex, built over 12 years of deployments to deserts, jungles, and foreign cities where knowing the layout of a room could mean walking out alive. Elena wasn't in uniform today. She wore dark jeans, a fitted olive jacket, and her dog tags tucked under her shirt. Her hair was braided loosely down her back. Not regulation, not needed today. She chose a corner table with her back to the wall, a small island of quiet in a sea of noise. The tray she carried held nothing but grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, and black coffee. Food was fuel, nothing more. Her first true day off in weeks, and this meal felt like the only ritual she'd managed to keep. For several minutes, the mess hall didn't bother her. She watched, unnoticed. Marines joked over protein bars. Navy personnel scrolled on their phones. Air Force techs argued over sports scores like the world depended on it. It was normal. It was familiar. And for someone who'd spent far too long living out of a rucksack in places where normal life didn't exist, it felt almost comforting. She didn't notice the group of privates at first. They came in loud, confident in the sloppy way young soldiers always were when surrounded by friends and anonymity. The leader, broad-shouldered, buzz-cut too fresh, a brand-new tattoo still shiny on his forearm, walked like someone who had gotten away with sarcasm one too many times. The kind of young man who believed the world responded to volume rather than competence. He spotted Elena almost immediately. To him, she looked like a civilian, maybe someone's girlfriend, maybe a visiting aunt, maybe nobody. He elbowed one of his buddies, nodded toward her, grinned. The junior enlisted humor, half cocky, half insecure, spread through the group, and they angled toward the back corner like wolves circling something they thought was harmless. Elena didn't look up as they approached. She was cutting into her chicken, savoring the first quiet bite she'd had in days, letting her shoulders drop just an inch from their usual tension. She had forgotten, for the briefest moment, what it felt like to not be on alert. The private slammed his tray down on the table hard enough to rattle her cup. The sudden noise didn't make her flinch. Combat had burned that out of her years ago, but it did make her raise her head. He smirked at her with the smug confidence of someone who'd never been punched by the world. "Hey, you know civilians aren't supposed to eat here, right?" Elena blinked slowly. Not fear, not annoyance, just disbelief that this interruption had arrived on the one day she wanted to be left alone. She didn't respond. The private took her silence as an invitation to keep going. "You lost? Or just hungry enough to wander where you shouldn't?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice with the smug drawl of someone who thought he was being clever. "Don't worry, I can help you find the visitor center." A couple of soldiers at nearby tables glanced over. Their eyes widened a little, then quickly darted away. They knew the rules of military culture. You didn't disrespect strangers, especially not older ones, especially not women alone. especially not on a base where rank could hide under civilian clothes. But the private didn't notice the shift in the air. He thought he was being funny. You visiting someone? Or are you just here for the free food? Elena took a sip of her coffee. It was the calmest possible answer to the most unnecessary provocation. But the private wasn't done humiliating himself. What? He asked with mock innocence. Too shy to talk? Hey guys. Maybe she doesn't speak English. More laughter. Not loud. Nervous. Someone whispered, "Bro, stop." But quietly. Too quietly for him to hear. The private tapped her table with 2 fingers. Condescending. Impatient. "You're not supposed to be here." Elena finally spoke. Her voice was low, even, and completely unbothered. "I am exactly where I'm supposed to be." He scoffed. "Yeah? And what makes you so sure?" She reached into her jacket pocket and placed her Marine Corps officer ID card on the table. Everything stopped. The tray in his hand slipped an inch. His smirk vanished so fast it looked painful. His friends went pale. Conversations around them died mid-sentence. Somewhere across the room, a fork clattered to the floor, the sound brutally loud in the sudden silence. The private stared at the ID, then at her, then back at the ID again. "Captain Brooke," he whispered, horrified. Elena stood up slowly. She wasn't tall, but somehow she felt taller than everyone in the room. She picked up her ID, looked him straight in the eyes, and said quietly, "You don't talk to people that way. Not here. Not anywhere." And she walked away, leaving him frozen, tray in hand, mouth open, humiliated in front of an entire room, suddenly reminded of why humility mattered. For the first time all day, the mess hall was silent. The mess hall didn't fully return to life for several minutes after Captain Elena Brooke walked out. The silence she left behind stretched across the room, thick and uncomfortable, like a blanket nobody wanted but everyone felt. Conversations that had been mid-laughter stalled, cooled, and died. A few Marines tried to pretend nothing had happened, shoveling food into their mouths with artificial intensity. Others kept sneaking glances toward the private still standing there, his tray trembling slightly in his hands, the color drained from his face. He didn't sit down. He didn't move. He stood frozen, the humiliation settling into his spine like ice water. His friends didn't know what to say either. Their earlier bravado evaporated, replaced by a sudden awareness of how stupid the entire encounter had been. You could joke around with your buddies. You could complain about training, tease, push each other, even mock new recruits if they seemed clueless, but you didn't target strangers on base. And you definitely didn't target women you didn't know. Not in the modern military. Not ever. It was unspoken cultural law. One of the privates finally cleared his throat. "Cooper, bro, I think you just screwed yourself." Private Daniel Cooper didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the doorway Elena had walked through, as if she might suddenly reappear and deliver a second blow. He didn't understand how a simple joke had turned into a complete disaster. He had seen a woman alone in civilian clothes. That was it. He thought she looked harmless. He thought she wouldn't fight back. He thought, well, that was the problem. He thought nothing. His friend nudged him harder. "Dude, say something." Cooper set down his tray on the closest table. For once his voice came out small, almost childlike. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Yeah," another muttered. "That's the issue." Across the room, a staff sergeant who had witnessed the entire exchange finally spoke. "Pack your stuff, Private. You're reporting this." Voluntarily. Cooper blinked. "Reporting?" The sergeant nodded slowly. "Either you walk yourself into the battalion office and explain what happened before word reaches them, or you get dragged there with a written statement someone else writes for you. Choose the option where your dignity isn't completely dead." Cooper's stomach twisted. Reporting yourself meant admitting fault, delivering testimony that might be used against you. But not reporting meant worse. Much worse. He'd heard stories. Command hated troublemakers, especially disrespect cases. And disrespect toward a Marine officer? Even if she'd been off duty, even if he hadn't recognized her? That was the kind of incident that followed you like a shadow. The silence in the room deepened again as he tried to find his breath. His friends backed away slightly, not abandoning him but distancing themselves just enough to signal that whatever fallout came next would land on him alone. The sergeant crossed his arms. "Move, Private. Now." Cooper finally obeyed. His boots felt 50 pounds heavier with every step as he followed the sergeant out the mess hall doors. He already knew he was in for hell. He just didn't know how deep the hole would be. Elena Brooke, meanwhile, had moved on with her day, or tried to. She crossed the base grounds toward the quiet administrative buildings, coffee still in hand. She wasn't angry. Not exactly. She had dealt with 1,000 versions of that private across her career. Immature, loud, overconfident, trained enough to feel powerful but not enough to understand responsibility. He represented a type of soldier she'd seen in every unit she'd served with. The kid who didn't understand that discipline and respect weren't rules, they were survival tools. Still, she couldn't shake the scene from her mind. Not because he'd insulted her. She'd been shot at, blown off her feet, dragged through mud, and patched up by medics who didn't know her name. Words couldn't hurt someone who'd stood beside Marines taking their last breaths. What bothered her was how easily young men still underestimated women in uniform. How quickly they assumed weakness because someone didn't fit their idea of strength. She reached her office building, intending to grab a change of files before heading home. But as she approached the door, a familiar voice called out from behind her. "Captain Brooke." She turned. First Sergeant Ray Haskins stood several yards away, his frame unmistakable. Broad shoulders, calm posture, the presence of a man who commanded attention without ever needing to raise his voice. He walked toward her with his usual measured stride. "Ma'am," he said, stopping in front of her. "I heard something happened in the mess hall." News traveled fast on a base. Faster than radio signals, sometimes. Elena offered a faint smile. "Word gets around, I guess." Haskins nodded. "Cooper." "Yes." He exhaled through his nose. Of course it was Cooper. Elena tilted her head. "You know him?" The first sergeant rubbed his temple. "Know him? I've had him in my office 5 times in the last month. Not for anything serious, just minor discipline issues. Excessive noise in the barracks. Smart mouth during PT. Nothing harmful. Just immature." "That tracks," Elena replied softly. "He didn't know who you were. Didn't recognize you." "I wasn't in uniform," Elena said. "He didn't need the rank to know how to speak to someone." Haskins looked at her for a long moment, weighing his next words. "Ma'am, he's terrified." He came straight to the office, shaking like a kid caught stealing from the PX. Elena didn't expect that. "He confessed everything," Haskins added. "Didn't hide a thing." "Good," Elena said, though her voice held no joy in hearing it. She wasn't vindictive. She didn't want revenge. She wanted correction. "Ma'am," Haskins said gently, "Command is going to ask for your statement. They'll want to know how you want to handle this. You can pursue disciplinary action or—" He paused. "Or you can choose a different approach." "What do you mean?" Haskins lowered his voice. "He's not malicious. Dumb? Yes. Ego-driven? Yes. But he's not cruel. He just hasn't been taught yet." Elena watched a pair of Marines jog past, their cadence echoing lightly across the courtyard. "He embarrassed himself," she said. "He embarrassed the uniform." "Agreed," Haskins replied. "But he might become a good Marine someday if someone shows him the right way." She didn't answer immediately. Her mind drifted to the faces of young Marines she'd trained. Some she'd yelled at, some she'd mentored, some she'd watched grow from scared recruits into men and women who could lead others through fire. Finally, she nodded. "Bring him to me," she said. Haskins didn't look surprised. "Yes, ma'am." She walked into the building. Haskins turned the opposite direction. The base, for a moment, felt a little quieter than usual. The consequences had begun. But for the first time since the incident, Elena wasn't thinking about the insult. She was thinking about what came next. First Sergeant Haskins didn't need long to find Private Cooper. He was exactly where Haskins expected him to be. sitting on a plastic chair outside the battalion administrative office, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly together as though holding himself in place. His eyes flicked up when Haskins approached, and for the first time since joining the Marines, Cooper looked painfully young. "On your feet, Private," Haskins said. Cooper stood instantly, the chair scraping across the floor. "Yes, First Sergeant. You're coming with me." A moment of hesitation crossed Cooper's face. "Sir, am I being discharged?" Haskins didn't slow his stride. "You'll find out soon enough. Move." Cooper swallowed and followed. He was sweating, and not from heat. Every step felt like he was walking farther into a hole he'd dug with his own bare hands. He replayed the mess hall scene over and over in his mind. The laughter, the joke he thought would land, the moment the woman turned, and the crushing realization that she wasn't just some stranger. She was someone important, someone dangerous, someone respected, someone he'd insulted. They reached a quiet conference room inside a small administrative building. Haskins opened the door. Inside, Cooper stepped in and froze. Captain Elena Brooke sat at the table, a stack of personnel papers in front of her, though she wasn't reading them. She looked up as the two men entered. There was no anger in her face, no ice, no condescension, just calm control, which somehow made Cooper feel worse. Haskins stepped inside behind him and closed the door. "Ma'am," Private Cooper reporting. Elena nodded once. "Thank you, First Sergeant. You can wait outside." Haskins hesitated. He didn't love leaving a terrified private alone with an officer after something like this. But Elena gave him a reassuring look. He nodded and stepped out. The door shut. Silence stretched. "Sit," Elena said. Cooper sat stiffly, boots together, hands on his knees. He looked like he was awaiting sentencing. Elena folded her hands. "Private Cooper, do you know why you're here?" He nodded weakly. "Yes, ma'am. I want to hear you say it." His mouth felt dry. "Because I disrespected you, ma'am." Her eyes stayed steady on him. "Do you know what disrespect means?" "Yes, ma'am." "Explain it." Cooper swallowed hard. "Treating someone like they're beneath you. Talking to them like they don't deserve respect. Acting like an ass." Elena raised one eyebrow. "Crude, but accurate." Cooper stared at the table. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I didn't ask for an apology," she said. Her voice remained calm, but it held a weight that pinned him in his chair. "I asked for understanding." He blinked. "Ma'am." She leaned back slightly, speaking in a measured tone. "This uniform, whether we're wearing it at that moment or not, demands discipline. It demands awareness. It demands that you treat others with respect until they prove they don't deserve it. Not the other way around." Cooper nodded, ashamed. "You looked at me," she continued, "and assumed weakness. Assumed I was harmless." "Why?" The private opened his mouth, but the truth caught him off guard. He wasn't sexist. At least he didn't think he was. He had female friends, respected female NCOs, admired women Marines. But in the mess hall, with his idiot friends egging him on and ego pumping through his chest, something had snapped. I don't know," he said honestly. "I wasn't thinking." "That's the problem," Elena said. "You're in a profession where not thinking gets people killed." Those words hit him like a gut punch. Cooper wanted to say something, anything, but Elena wasn't done. "Tell me, Private, what did you learn from our little encounter?" He hesitated. "That I need to treat others with respect." "Too vague," she replied. "Try again." He tried harder. "That I shouldn't judge someone based on appearances." Better, but still not it. He looked up, confused. Elena leaned forward now, elbows on the table, her voice firm but not cruel. "You learned that you are not as experienced as you think you are. That you are still learning. That your ego is larger than your discipline. And that you must fix that if you want to survive in this institution." Cooper's shoulders slumped. It felt like she had reached inside his chest and exposed the part of him he tried hardest to protect. The part that feared he wasn't good enough. After a long silence, Elena spoke again, much gentler now. "Private Cooper, I'm not here to ruin your career. If I wanted to, we wouldn't be talking in this small room. You'd be facing disciplinary review. Cooper's breath caught. So, what happens now, ma'am? She studied him for several seconds before answering. That depends on you. He looked up. I could write you up, she said. I could recommend reprimand. I could have you transferred. But I'm giving you an alternative. Cooper leaned forward slightly, hope flickering. Anything, ma'am. You will report, she said, every morning for the next 8 weeks, to mentoring sessions with First Sergeant Haskins. Cooper blinked. Mentoring? Yes, Elena replied firmly. Real mentoring. Professionalism. Respect. Discipline. Maturity. You need it. He nodded fast. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, ma'am. And, she added, you will start by writing a full statement of what happened today. Not from fear. From reflection. Yes, ma'am. And, she finished, you will apologize. Not to me. To yourself. Cooper froze. Ma'am. You're the one who embarrassed yourself. Not me. He stared at her. Not sure how someone could be both intimidating and compassionate at the same time. Finally, Elena stood. Cooper immediately followed suit. You're dismissed, Private. He saluted shakily. Yes, ma'am. As he turned to leave, Elena spoke one last time. Cooper. He paused, hand on the door. You can be a good Marine, she said quietly. But only if you choose to be. Cooper swallowed hard. I will, ma'am. He stepped out, closing the door behind him. And for the first time since the mess hall incident, he felt something unexpected. Direction. Private Daniel Cooper didn't walk out of the administrative building. He drifted, carried by a mixture of dread, relief, and confusion. The sunlight outside seemed brighter, almost too bright for the heaviness sitting in his chest. First Sergeant Haskins stood near the doorway, arms crossed like a statue waiting to judge his every move. How'd it go? Haskins asked. Cooper's voice cracked. She didn't crush me, First Sergeant. Haskins snorted. Then she went easy. Cooper didn't argue. He wasn't stupid enough to think he got off lightly. Report to me at 0600 tomorrow, Haskins said. Bring a notebook. And don't be late. Cooper nodded vigorously. Yes, First Sergeant. Haskins stepped closer. This isn't punishment, Cooper. This is correction. You're lucky she chose this path. Most officers would have roasted you alive. Cooper felt that truth settle deep in his bones. I know, First Sergeant. Haskins gave a curt nod. Then don't waste it. The first mentoring session would begin tomorrow. For now, Cooper had something else to face. The mess hall. By dinner, the entire base knew what had happened. Word moved faster than paperwork, faster than orders, faster than common sense. When Cooper walked in, conversations dipped, eyes flicked toward him, and he felt every gaze like a finger pressing into his ribs. He sat alone. It wasn't punishment. It was self-imposed exile. Even his buddies didn't join him, not because they abandoned him, but because they respected the unspoken rule. When you screw up this badly, you sit with your thoughts. He picked at his food, appetite gone. His mind was loud and messy, replaying the moment Elena had stared him down. The more he thought about it, the more he realized she hadn't been angry. She had been steady, controlled, relentlessly logical, and that made everything worse. A tray slid onto the table in front of him. Cooper looked up, startled. Private Alvarez sat down. One of his own squad members. Not one of the instigators in the mess hall. Someone better than him. You look like you're about to puke, Alvarez said calmly. Cooper groaned. Thanks. Just calling it like I see it. You good? Not even remotely. Alvarez ate a spoonful of mashed potatoes. Good. You shouldn't be. You needed the wake-up call. Cooper rested his face in his hands. I messed up. Yeah, Alvarez said. But messing up isn't the end of the world unless you refuse to repair it. Cooper peeked at him through his fingers. You sound like a motivational poster. Shut up and let me help you, Alvarez said, elbowing him lightly. Cooper cracked a tiny smile, his first all day. Look, man, Alvarez continued. Everyone's been an idiot at some point. You're just unlucky enough that your idiot moment happened in front of a Marine officer. Cooper moaned. Don't remind me. You're mentored by Haskins, right? Alvarez asked. Yeah, for 8 weeks. Alvarez let out a low whistle. Oof, Haskins doesn't play. No kidding. Well, Alvarez said, stabbing a chicken nugget. At least you'll come out of this a better Marine. Cooper nodded slowly, and for the first time since the incident, he actually believed that might be possible. Meanwhile, across base, Elena Brooke walked into the officers' gym for a late workout. She preferred the quiet hours, when most Marines were finishing their daily schedules or heading back to the barracks. The gym smelled faintly of rubber mats and disinfectant, a familiar, grounding scent. She pulled her hair back, grabbed a set of dumbbells and started her routine. Strength training always helped her clear her mind. Today, however, even the steady rhythm of her exercises couldn't fully shake the memory of the private's startled, wounded expression. She set the weights down and took a breath. Rough day? A voice asked. Elena turned to see Major Leland Grant, one of her closest friends on base. He was leaning against a pillar with a towel draped around his neck, sweat still glistening across his forehead. You heard, Elena said. The entire base heard, Grant replied with a smirk. You practically shut down lunch hour. Elena shook her head. I didn't mean to cause a scene. Grant shrugged. You didn't. Cooper did. He's not a bad kid, Elena said quietly. Just undisciplined. That's half the core, Grant said. He walked over and picked up a kettlebell. What are you going to do with him? I already did something, she replied. I gave him to Haskins. Grant stopped mid-swing. Ooh, brutal. He needs guidance, Elena said. Not punishment. Grant studied her for a moment. You really think he can be salvaged? Elena nodded. If he's willing to learn. Grant let out a breath. Well, if anyone can straighten him out, it's Haskins. Elena picked her dumbbells back up. Then he'll come out of this better. That's the goal. Grant smiled. You know, you're too good at this. At what? Leadership, he said simply. You don't just outrank people. You actually guide them. Elena shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Someone did it for me once. Grant nodded slowly. So, you're paying it forward. She didn't answer, but the truth was clear in her mind. Someone had shaped her. Someone had corrected her arrogance, her mistakes, her early career stubbornness. And now it was her turn to be that person for someone else. Back in the barracks, Cooper lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling. The lights were dim, the room hummed quiet. He listened to the steady breathing of the Marines around him. His notebook lay open on his chest. He had written half a page, just half, but every word felt heavier than the last. I thought I was being funny. I thought she was weak. I didn't think. I didn't look. I didn't respect the uniform or myself. He stopped writing and exhaled shakily. He wasn't proud of himself. But for the first time in his life, he understood humility as something more than shame. It was a path, a beginning. And tomorrow at 0600, that path would start with First Sergeant Haskins. Whether he liked it or not. Private Daniel Cooper didn't walk out of the administrative building. He drifted, carried by a mixture of dread, relief, and confusion. The sunlight outside seemed brighter, almost too bright for the heaviness sitting in his chest. First Sergeant Haskins stood near the doorway, arms crossed like a statue waiting to judge his every move. How'd it go? Haskins asked. Cooper's voice cracked. She didn't crush me, First Sergeant. Haskins snorted. Then she went easy. Cooper didn't argue. He wasn't stupid enough to think he got off lightly. Report to me at 0600 tomorrow, Haskins said. Bring a notebook. And don't be late. Cooper nodded vigorously. Yes, First Sergeant. Haskins stepped closer. This isn't punishment, Cooper. This is correction. You're lucky she chose this path. Most officers would have roasted you alive. Cooper felt that truth settle deep in his bones. I know, First Sergeant. Haskins gave a curt nod. Then don't waste it. The first mentoring session would begin tomorrow. For now, Cooper had something else to face. The mess hall. By dinner, the entire base knew what had happened. Word moved faster than paperwork, faster than orders, faster than common sense. When Cooper walked in, conversations dipped, eyes flicked toward him, and he felt every gaze like a finger pressing into his ribs. He sat alone. It wasn't punishment. It was self-imposed exile. Even his buddies didn't join him, not because they abandoned him, but because they respected the unspoken rule. When you screw up this badly, you sit with your thoughts. He picked at his food, appetite gone. His mind was loud and messy, replaying the moment Elena had stared him down. The more he thought about it, the more he realized she hadn't been angry. She had been steady, controlled, relentlessly logical, and that made everything worse. A tray slid onto the table in front of him. Cooper looked up, startled. Private Alvarez sat down. One of his own squad members. Not one of the instigators in the mess hall. Someone better than him. You look like you're about to puke, Alvarez said calmly. Cooper groaned. Thanks. Just calling it like I see it. You good? Not even remotely. Alvarez ate a spoonful of mashed potatoes. Good. You shouldn't be. You needed the wake-up call. Cooper rested his face in his hands. I messed up. Yeah, Alvarez said. But messing up isn't the end of the world unless you refuse to repair it. Cooper peeked at him through his fingers. You sound like a motivational poster. Shut up and let me help you, Alvarez said, elbowing him lightly. Cooper cracked a tiny smile, his first all day. Look, man, Alvarez continued. Everyone's been an idiot at some point. You're just unlucky enough that your idiot moment happened in front of a Marine officer. Cooper moaned. Don't remind me. You're mentored by Haskins, right? Alvarez asked. Yeah, for 8 weeks. Alvarez let out a low whistle. Oof, Haskins doesn't play. No kidding. Well, Alvarez said, stabbing a chicken nugget. At least you'll come out of this a better Marine. Cooper nodded slowly, and for the first time since the incident, he actually believed that might be possible. Meanwhile, across base, Elena Brooke walked into the officers' gym for a late workout. She preferred the quiet hours, when most Marines were finishing their daily schedules or heading back to the barracks. The gym smelled faintly of rubber mats and disinfectant, a familiar, grounding scent. She pulled her hair back, grabbed a set of dumbbells and started her routine. Strength training always helped her clear her mind. Today, however, even the steady rhythm of her exercises couldn't fully shake the memory of the private's startled, wounded expression. She set the weights down and took a breath. Rough day? A voice asked. Elena turned to see Major Leland Grant, one of her closest friends on base. He was leaning against a pillar with a towel draped around his neck, sweat still glistening across his forehead. You heard, Elena said. The entire base heard, Grant replied with a smirk. You practically shut down lunch hour. Elena shook her head. I didn't mean to cause a scene. Grant shrugged. You didn't. Cooper did. He's not a bad kid, Elena said quietly. Just undisciplined. That's half the core, Grant said. He walked over and picked up a kettlebell. What are you going to do with him? I already did something, she replied. I gave him to Haskins. Grant stopped mid-swing. Ooh, brutal. He needs guidance, Elena said. Not punishment. Grant studied her for a moment. You really think he can be salvaged? Elena nodded. If he's willing to learn. Grant let out a breath. Well, if anyone can straighten him out, it's Haskins. Elena picked her dumbbells back up. Then he'll come out of this better. That's the goal. Grant smiled. You know, you're too good at this. At what? Leadership, he said simply. You don't just outrank people. You actually guide them. Elena shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Someone did it for me once. Grant nodded slowly. So, you're paying it forward. She didn't answer, but the truth was clear in her mind. Someone had shaped her. Someone had corrected her arrogance, her mistakes, her early career stubbornness. And now it was her turn to be that person for someone else. Back in the barracks, Cooper lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling. The lights were dim. The room hummed quiet. He listened to the steady breathing of the Marines around him. His notebook lay open on his chest. He had written half a page. Just half, but every word felt heavier than the last. I thought I was being funny. I thought she was weak. I didn't think. I didn't look. I didn't respect the uniform or myself. He stopped writing and exhaled shakily. He wasn't proud of himself. But for the first time in his life, he understood humility as something more than shame. It was a path, a beginning, and tomorrow at 0600, that path would start with First Sergeant Haskins, whether he liked it or not. Over the next week, Private Daniel Cooper discovered a version of himself he didn't know existed. First Sergeant Haskins wasn't just strict. He was relentless in a way that felt both punishing and strangely purposeful. Every morning at 6 o'clock, Cooper met him at the training field. Every morning they ran until Cooper's legs shook. Every session ended with writing reflections in his notebook, each page filling with insights that cut deeper than he expected. On day 5, the question Haskins posed was, "What kind of Marine do you want to be when no one is watching?" Cooper had stared at the blank page for a long time before writing anything. For the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about how others saw him. He was thinking about how he saw himself. It was humbling, uncomfortable, and strangely empowering. By the end of the week, the other Marines had begun to notice the change. He stood straighter. He spoke less. He listened more. He no longer cracked jokes to fill silence or performed for attention. He was quieter now, as if carrying something new inside him, a seriousness he hadn't had before, and people respected it. It surprised him how quickly respect followed humility. One afternoon, after finishing his mentoring session, Cooper walked across the base toward the supply center. He passed a group of Marines lounging near the gym entrance. Normally, he might have joined them or worse, tried to impress them. Instead, he kept his pace steady, eyes forward. But as he approached, one of them called out, "Yo, Cooper." He paused. Lance Corporal Briggs jogged up to him. Briggs was older, sharper, the kind of Marine whose confidence came from experience. "Heard you're doing sessions with Haskins," Briggs said. Cooper nodded. "Yeah." Briggs looked him over. "You look different." Cooper shrugged. "Feels different." Briggs smirked. "Captain Brooke really put the fear of God in you, huh?" Cooper winced at the mention of her name. "Something like that." Briggs leaned closer. "Word of advice. She's not someone you want to get on the wrong side of. She's tough. Fair, but tough." Cooper nodded. "I know." Briggs tilted his head. "You planning to apologize to her?" Cooper froze. "Should I?" Briggs shrugged. "Not required. You already faced consequences. But it wouldn't hurt. Shows maturity. Shows growth." Cooper looked toward the admin buildings in the distance. "I want to. I just don't want to bother her." Briggs gave him a rare, approving nod. "If you mean it, it won't bother her." Later that day, Cooper found himself outside Captain Brooke's building without entirely meaning to be there. He stared at the door, heart pounding. He wasn't afraid of her, not the way he had been before, but he respected her in a way he didn't know how to express. He finally raised his hand and knocked. "Come in," a calm voice said. Cooper stepped inside. Elena Brooke sat behind her desk, typing. She looked up when she saw him, and Cooper braced himself for cold professionalism. Instead, her expression softened slightly. "Private Cooper, what can I do for you?" He stood at attention. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize." Elena set her pen down. "We've already discussed the incident." "I know, ma'am," he said, "but I wanted to apologize, for the right reasons this time." She studied him for a moment, really studied him, and Cooper felt exposed again, though less painfully than last time. More like she was seeing something he was beginning to see in himself. "I'm listening," she said. Cooper took a steady breath. "I didn't respect you because I didn't respect myself enough to act like a Marine. I made you feel disrespected when you didn't deserve it. And I made the Corps look bad. I've been working with First Sergeant Haskins and I'm learning, ma'am." I really am. His voice wavered, not from weakness, but sincerity. I'm sorry. Elena didn't respond right away. She didn't need to. Her silence wasn't judgment, it was assessment. Do you understand? She said finally. That you're not apologizing to me personally. You're apologizing to the standard we both represent. Yes, ma'am. And do you understand that your growth is the only apology that truly matters? Yes, ma'am. Elena rose from her chair. Cooper stiffened further. Private, she said. Look at me. He did. For what it's worth. I'm proud of the direction you're moving. Cooper's breath caught. Thank you, ma'am. And one day, she added, when you outrank me, you'll be teaching someone else the same lesson. He blinked. Ma'am, I don't think. Good, she said with a small smile. Thinking too far ahead is how new Marines trip over their own boots. Cooper let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. Keep working with First Sergeant Haskins, she said. Keep choosing the harder, better path. Dismissed. He saluted sharply. Yes, ma'am. As he left the office, he felt a quiet sense of pride warming his chest. Pride not in his rank, but in his progress. Meanwhile, Elena returned to her desk and opened an email she'd been ignoring for a few hours. A request to lead a new professional development workshop for junior Marines. She considered it carefully. After meeting Cooper, something inside her shifted. Maybe leadership wasn't just guiding missions. Maybe leadership was guiding people. And Cooper, unintentionally, had reminded her of that. She clicked, accept. That night, Cooper sat on his bunk, writing in his notebook again. But this time his words had purpose, clarity. I want to be the Marine who lifts others up, not tears them down. I want to be the Marine Captain Brooke believed I could be. I want to be someone who brings honor to the uniform, not embarrassment. He paused, then added, and someday, I want to repay what she gave me. He closed the notebook and set it aside. His path wasn't easy, but now, for the first time, he understood that difficulty was the point. And somewhere across base, Elena Brooke, who hadn't intended to become a mentor, was beginning to realize that she was shaping more than one Marine's future. She was shaping her own. 2 weeks later, the base seemed to breathe differently. Or maybe it was just Cooper who had changed enough to feel the difference. He carried himself with a steadiness he hadn't earned before. People who once ignored him now greeted him with nods. Even his squad, once amused by his loud antics, now watched him with a kind of cautious respect. But real change wasn't measured by eyes around you. It was measured by the moment you faced your past self and chose differently. That moment came on a hot Friday afternoon. Cooper was walking across the training yard when he spotted 3 younger Marines surrounding a nervous-looking recruit near the pull-up bars. They weren't hurting him. They were mocking him, laughing at his trembling voice and uncertain posture. It was familiar, too familiar. Cooper felt an uncomfortable jolt in his chest. That had been him. He could still hear his own voice in the mess hall that day, loud, careless, trying too hard to impress the wrong people. He walked toward the group before he even realized he was moving. Hey! He called out, not shouting, not aggressive, firm. The 3 Marines turned. One of them scoffed. Relax, Cooper. We're just messing with him. Cooper kept walking until he stood between the recruit and his hecklers. I know exactly what you're doing. The Marines exchanged looks, surprised but not intimidated. Man, chill out. No, Cooper said. Not this time. His voice didn't shake. His feet were planted. His tone was calm, but immovable, Haskins-level calm. You don't know this guy, Cooper continued. You don't know where he came from or what he's been through. You don't know what he's fighting to overcome just to stand here today. You want to joke around? Fine. Joke with each other. But leave the boots alone until they learn the ropes. One Marine stepped forward, irritated. Since when did you get so righteous? Since someone did the same thing for me, Cooper said. It wasn't a threat. It was the truth. For a moment, nobody spoke. The wind pushed dust across the pavement. In the silence, Cooper stood exactly the way Captain Brooke had stood in the mess hall. Not looking for a fight, not looking to impress, simply anchored in conviction. The oldest of the three finally muttered, "Whatever, man," and walked off. The others followed. Cooper exhaled slowly, then turned to the recruit. "You okay?" The kid nodded, embarrassed. "Yes, Private Cooper." "Good." Cooper clapped his shoulder. "Come train with my squad later. We'll help you get up to speed." The recruit's eyes brightened with relief. "Thank you, sir. Thank you." "Relax," Cooper said. "We all start somewhere." As the recruit jogged off, Cooper stood alone, absorbing what had just happened. He didn't feel proud. He didn't feel heroic. He just felt different, stronger, more responsible, more like the Marine he wanted to be. Later that afternoon, Cooper met First Sergeant Haskins for what had become their routine end-of-week review. Haskins stood at the edge of the training field, arms crossed as Cooper approached. "You look less stupid today," Haskins said dryly. Cooper cracked a faint smile. "Thank you, First Sergeant." "So," Haskins said, "what did you do today that proves you're not the same loudmouthed kid from the mess hall?" Cooper told him the story, every detail. Haskins listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Cooper finished, the first sergeant nodded once. "What you did today," Haskins said, "was the real test." Cooper blinked. "Test? First Sergeant? Anyone can take punishment," Haskins replied. "Anyone can say sorry. But stepping in when you see someone else making the same mistake you made? That's leadership. And leadership is what the Corps needs from men like you." Cooper didn't know what to say. The praise felt heavier than any reprimand. Haskins looked toward the admin buildings. "You should go tell Captain Brooke about it." Cooper hesitated. "Do you think she'd want to know?" "She invested in you," Haskins said. "The least you can do is tell her what she earned." Cooper's heart thudded again as he walked toward her office. But it wasn't fear this time. It was purpose. Inside, Captain Elena Brooke was reviewing after-action reports. She looked up as Cooper knocked lightly. "Private Cooper," she said. "Come in." He stood at attention. "Ma'am, I wanted to report something that happened today." She watched him with the same unreadable calm as before. "Go on." Cooper recounted everything, the recruit, the confrontation, the words he'd used. Elena listened quietly, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly. When he finished, the silence between them was thick but warm. "Private," she said finally. "Do you know what you demonstrated today?" He shook his head. "Not exactly, ma'am." "Integrity," she said. "Courage. And judgment. Those matter far more than avoiding mistakes." Cooper swallowed hard. "I'm trying, ma'am." "No," Elena corrected gently. "You're succeeding." He felt the words land deep, the way only truth could. "You've come a long way," she continued. "And the Marine Corps needs men who learn, who adapt, who rise. If you keep going down this road, you're going to become someone others look to, not someone they avoid." A warmth spread in his chest. Quiet, steady, grounding. "Thank you, ma'am," he said sincerely. Elena nodded once. "Dismissed, Private." He saluted sharply. "Yes, ma'am." He left the office with a sense of clarity he'd never had before. He didn't know what his future held, promotions, deployments, leadership roles. But for the first time, he felt ready for all of it. He felt like a Marine. Not because of his uniform, not because of his rank, but because of the man he was becoming. The path had been painful, but it had brought him exactly where he needed to be. In the end, Private Daniel Cooper didn't become a better Marine because he was punished or embarrassed. He became a better Marine because someone, Captain Elena Brooke, saw past his mistake and believed he could rise above it. The Marine Corps is filled with men and women whose strength isn't measured by rank, medals, or muscle. It's measured by humility, by growth, by the courage it takes to face your own faults and choose a higher standard. Cooper didn't simply avoid a disciplinary mark on his record. He earned something far more valuable, a new foundation. A foundation built not on ego, but on discipline. Not on noise, but on character. Not on bravado, but on respect. And in those quiet moments, when he corrected another Marine, when he chose leadership over attention, he finally understood the deeper truth of the Corps. A Marine is not defined by the mistakes he makes. A Marine is defined by how he rises after making them. To every service member, veteran, and supporter who understands these values, this story is yours too. It honors the mentors who shaped us, the leaders who corrected us, and the quiet choices that made us who we are. If the story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone who once believed in you, like the video to help it reach others. Share it with someone who lives by honor, discipline, and quiet strength. Subscribe to Endless Stories for more powerful military tales that celebrate courage, growth, and the unseen heroes among us. Your engagement keeps these stories alive. Your support helps us honor those who serve.